The Giants' month-long saga involving cornerback James Bradberry's future has finally come to an end. Hi, everybody. This is Patricia Trainer reporting. And earlier this week, as he was making the radio rounds post-draft, Giants general manager Jasen said that the team's situation with cornerback James Bradberry, who had been on the trading block for some time now because of his high cap hit, would probably be resolved by the end of the week. Well, here we are. We're at the end of the week, and the 29-year-old Bradberry is now an ex-Giant after the team failed to find a trade market for him. Now, unfortunately, this whole situation is a reminder about the dangers of trying to build through free agency and putting stress on the salary cap. The Giants in 2021 did just that. They added free agent after free agent after free agent. They restructured deals to make it happen. And ultimately, folks, they ran out of cap space. It got to the point where they had to restructure some of their bigger contracts, add money onto the following year's contract, that being 2022, which was the case with Bradberry, in exchange for voidable years and whatnot. And the result is we had this mess that the Giants are currently in. The Giants right now about $6 million under the salary cap, but they need about $12.6 million to sign their draft class, and they just couldn't get around it anyway. They had to do something with Bradberry's contract. After not having a trade partner develop, this was the only way to do it, especially after attempts to negotiate down did not work. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Bradberry was reportedly asked to take a pay cut, but that just wasn't going to happen. And why should it? Why should James Bradberry have had to take a pay cut? Because the previous regime, which is no longer here, mismanaged the cap. That was just, not feasible. Teams sometimes hope that players realize that, oh, you're not going to get as much on the open market, so, take this pay cut and maybe you're going to, benefit from it. But kudos to James Bradberry for understanding and knowing his market value, if that report is indeed true. James Bradberry is still a very good player. In 2020, he was a Pro Bowler. He finished last year tied for 5th in pass breakups in the league, and he's been durable. The only game he's missed in 2 seasons for the Giants was one in which he had to sit on the reserve COVID list because he came in contact with somebody who had tested positive for the virus. Now, again, teams knew what the Giants' cap situation was, and they were willing to wait the situation out. In other words, nobody was going to give up draft picks or players for James Bradberry, knowing that if the Giants didn't find a trade partner, they would probably have no choice but to release him. So what's next then for both sides? Well, Bradberry to Las Vegas makes a lot of sense, where he would be reunited with defensive coordinator Patrick Graham, who of course was with the Giants from 2020 on. And James Bradberry is a guy who would fit perfectly into what Graham is doing. So I expect the Raiders to get involved into the mix for James Bradberry. I also wouldn't be surprised if the Philadelphia Eagles, in order to stick it to the Giants, make a play for James Bradberry and try and bring him on board. Okay, so the lesson again here, folks, is that it is wise to build through the draft. So this way, you avoid having to take expensive flyers on whiffs. This has been the story of the Giants for the last several years. They've had some whiffs in the draft. They've had to go out and they've had to overspend on free agents. You just never get the value that you invest in free agents as you would if you develop a guy from scratch. General Manager Jasen is trying to change that narrative, trying to bring in guys who they can develop, determine who's going to be part of the future, and reward those guys with the big bucks, which makes sense because these are the guys that you develop. These are the guys who are doing things the way you need them to as far as technique goes, as far as understanding the playbook. This is all making sense for the Giants. This is the approach they want to take. And as far as James Bradberry goes, look, great player. He probably would have fit into the defensive system. But again, the Giants need about $12.6 million to sign their draft class. And that's not even counting having money available, for the season when that starts, when they need to bring up guys from the practice squad and emergency signings and all that stuff. So unfortunately, James Bradberry, a victim of the salary cap, and he's an ex-Giant. So who's going to replace him? Well, I would expect that Aaron Robinson and Rodarius Williams will be two guys that will compete for that job. Now, the Giants did draft a rookie, Cordell Flott, out of LSU this year, who is a cornerback. I don't know that Flott will be ready. I think it's going to come down to, like I said, it's going to come down to Aaron Robinson, who has similar size to James Bradberry, who's physical like James Bradberry is. I would think he's going to be the incumbent entering training camp. I would not discount Rodarius Williams, a sixth-round pick for the Giants last year, and Jaron Williams, who is an undrafted free agent that stuck around on the practice squad and also made some appearances on the roster. I wouldn't rule him out either. It's basically going to be a wide-open competition, but I do think at the end of the day that Aaron Robinson is probably going to be the favorite to replace James Bradberry at that vacant spot. Be sure to keep it here on the LockedOn Giants podcast. We'll have plenty more coverage of the New York Giants, including full coverage of the upcoming rookie minicamp.